Welcome back to The Making of. I'm your host, Jack Pitts. Today's guest is Alex Dixon, former CEO of Resorts World Las Vegas and former executive at MGM Resorts and Caesars Entertainment. Alex's journey is honestly incredible. From growing up in Las Vegas as a third-generation casino employee to working at Goldman Sachs in New York and London to helping oversee billion-dollar casino developments and eventually becoming one of the youngest executives to run major properties on the Las Vegas Strip. In this episode, we talk about building MGM Springfield from the ground up, running Circus Circus, leading Resorts World Las Vegas, working on deals involving companies like Disney and Pixar during his investment banking days, and what it really takes to lead organizations with thousands of employees. We also get into leadership, career growth, hospitality, casinos, private equity, sacrifice, and why putting yourself in the right rooms can completely change your life. I'm super excited for this episode, and thanks so much for Alex to coming on. Let's get into it. Hi, Alex. Thanks so much for coming on to The Making of.
Well, thanks, Jack. It's great to see and hear you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, how's the Wednesday going? Any highlights so far?
No, it's great. It's always a beautiful day here in Las Vegas. We always get a lot of sunshine. So, yeah, kind of building this consulting practice. And so it's great here at Potential Client. And so excited to see what comes of it. But so far, so good.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Always just taking a lot of ventures. Must be pretty cool. I bet you're probably the first guest that's ever recorded a podcast in their conference room.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I know this client. I've known him for quite some time. They're, both good friends, and as well as it's a place that is hopefully going to be able to do great things together. But it's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, no, really appreciate you coming on. And so would love to kind of just, the making of is all about, hearing entrepreneurs like yourself stories. So I'd love to, bring it all the way back to, where you grew up, family, upbringing,
Absolutely.
first
Yeah,
job.
no, look, going all the way back. Look, so again, Alex Dixon. I'm born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. A third generation, I like to joke and say, casino employee. But in all seriousness, my grandmother, she was a housekeeper. She was moved up here in the 1950s from Tallulah, Louisiana, and raised all of my aunts and uncles, and was a housekeeper for many years. And my dad was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base. He left Opelika, Alabama, and came out here to Vegas in the 60s. And so we've been here in Las Vegas for quite some time. I went to Durango High School here locally, played a lot of sports, was active in a bunch of clubs and activities. I was student body president in high school, but decided to go to Howard University in Washington, D.C. to study finance. And I walked on and played football, had a great time, but realized I wasn't going to be the next great scat back in the NFL and that I better find something else. And so fortunately, really Wall Street found me. I mean, I had absolutely no idea about Wall Street, the concept of it growing up in Vegas. That wasn't a thing. But that's what college is about, is about exposing you and about getting you opportunities. And so I had an opportunity my freshman year to work in internal consulting services at J.P. Morgan literally on Wall Street. And it was an eye-opening experience. It was amazing. I worked hard. I was living at the YMCA in Hoboken, New Jersey, taking the PATH train over. It's my first time really taking public transportation at that scale, and it was intimidating. Made it through, but that's where I got exposed to investment banking and M&A. And went back to Howard. Was very engaged in on campus, but was very fortunate that Edith Hunt, who was the global head of human resources at Goldman Sachs at the time, she was just relentless in creating opportunity for us on campus. And I got an opportunity to get an internship my junior year in the Industrials and Natural Resources Group in Mergers and Strategic Advisory. And so I got the offer at the end of the summer and joined in, I guess that was summer of 2003. Right after graduating, moved up. I was living in Brooklyn, started as an analyst. So did about a year and Spent about 4 months on the equity capital markets desk before having an opportunity to move to London, and still stayed, investment banking division, but raising capital for folks in, again, oil and gas. We raised about $2.3 billion for RAS Gas, which was a joint venture between ExxonMobil and the state of Qatar. But London was amazing, just being able to travel literally all over the world. But I finished up my third year as an analyst in LA. And so it was a great time being able to spend on the West Coast. And I thought I was going to ride off into the sunset, but then I was a junior analyst on Disney's acquisition of Pixar. And so that pretty much took my life for the better part of a year almost. And so it was a great way to just learn about a big institution, big distribution, the role of technology and content, which is still playing out today. But was there, finished up, and moved after my 3 years, moved to Las Vegas, and I started at a boutique investment bank called Silver Pacific Advisors, and we were raising capital for developers who wanted to build big master plan communities. And it was a great time to be in Vegas. I mean, the market was on fire, but then it started to slow down. So what was interesting, though, is that the folks who were raising capital for these big master plan communities, some of them wanted to build a casino. And so once I got engaged with the management team who was there alongside the developer building the big community, that's where I got exposed to more casino management. And the light bulb for me went off and said, that's what I kind of want to go and be. And so I left the bank and I joined Harrah's Entertainment as a director of planning and analysis. TPG and Apollo had just bought it, and I joined. And it was a great time. And like a lot of big companies, you get coached, mentored, and developed. And I navigated throughout that process, and I got an opportunity to go work at the corporate office. I got an opportunity to work for several great leaders who have now gone on to do wonderful things within the industry. But eventually I said, hey, look, I raised my hand and said, I want to go out, I want to operate and run one of these buildings. And so the hard part about Vegas is that there is an oversupply of great talent here in the market. And the trajectory very much is to go out into what we call the regional markets to go up. And so it was no different. And so raised my hand and went to Baltimore, Maryland, to be the assistant general manager of Horseshoe Baltimore. We raised $442 million of project level debt. We hired 2,200 people, cut a deal with the city, with the state, and then helped to lead that business day to day alongside our general manager, Chad Barnhill. And it was amazing. Loved Baltimore, one of my favorite cities, very walkable. Was there for 4 years. And then I got a call from MGM to go be the general manager at MGM Springfield. It was about $1 billion development downtown. We had 14 acres. We had movie theater, bowling alley, arena, about 3,000 people. And it was just great impact on Western Massachusetts. Loved it. And my role was going to be eliminated. But fortunately, I landed as the president and chief operating officer at Circus Circus, still with MGM. So I thought my career I would stay with MGM, kind of the rest of it, but MGM decided to sell Circus, and so we sold it to Phil Ruffin for about $825 million. But fortunately, I had stayed in touch with an analyst friend of mine who was a partner at Cornell Capital. They had purchased Brady Linen in Las Vegas, and I went to go be the president of that. And we had 1,200 people doing laundry and linen in Vegas. And then COVID hit. And so we went from 1,200 to 45 in less than probably 10 days. It was just brutal. So we came out of that. I joined what was called the Nevada COVID-19 Task Force. It was led by my mentor and friend, Jim Murin. And so we went and, with a collection of other CEOs, raised a bunch of money to help make sure that the state could recover. Vegas at the time had about 33% unemployment. And we really needed to get the hospitality sector back going. And that was triggered really by the government apparatus. And so we wanted to make sure that we had PPE for all of our, frontline folks who are out there. And then later on, we did a lot of great things with education and some other grants to help ease the pain of COVID. But was doing that, and then got a call from a nonprofit casino in Dubuque, Iowa. And so moved to Dubuque in 2021.
That must have been an interesting transition going from Vegas to Dubuque. I can't
It is,
imagine.
I used to think Vegas was God's country, but then I moved to Iowa, and it was different. But I loved it.
Yeah, how
Iowa.
does a nonprofit casino work? I've never even heard of that, honestly.
Let's see. When I ran it, not well, but now it's phenomenal. No, but in all seriousness, it was really an amazing story. It's in a great American story, and I wish more people knew about it. I wish more people knew about the model because I think it really can change the world. But in short, back in the 1980s, in the mid 1980s, Dubuque was really hit hard from the farm crisis and then just all of the manufacturing that was leaving the Midwest. And so they had about 25% unemployment, jobs were leaving, lost about 10% of their population in a very short period of time. And so the community came together and raised about $7 million through a general obligation fund from the city of Dubuque to go and build a Greyhound racetrack. And so they built the track in order to attract visitors and drive visitation and tourism, and it worked. And so, but because the money was raised from the city, the profits had to go back to the city. And so the deal that was cut was 50% of the profits would go directly into the city's budget after they paid off the general obligation bond, and then the other 50% would go to charity. The facility then eventually added slot machines, and then Greyhound racing started to phase out, but they added table games, and eventually, had a great, great business, great locals business. And, I came in, let's call it August of 21 after retirement of the prior CEO. And I was very fortunate to have a great organization, great team. And we just needed some specific focus and attention on our development. And so we partnered with the city of Dubuque, including the mayor, the city council, the city manager, and our 21 members of the board to change the formula so that we could reinvest in our business. And so we changed it from 50-50 to a third went to charity, a third went to the city, and then a third went towards redevelopment. And so with that reinvestment into the business, that allowed us to go out and raise capital to redevelop the property and the island, which is called Schmidt Island, where it sits. And so was very fortunate. We had a great run. We built a 7-story hotel with a rooftop restaurant, an outdoor amphitheater. We redid the casino. We built a family entertainment zone. So, but the thing that's important is all those funds, go back to the community in some form or fashion. And so was having a great time doing that, helped to lead through that transformation. But sometimes, I liken that job and the role of being a head coach at a hot mid-major college who went really deep into the NCAA tournament, and then the Big Ten comes calling. So in this case, I got a text. It wasn't even a call. A text about joining to be the CEO of Resorts World Las Vegas, and I joined. And amazing experience. Probably shorter than what I would imagined, but the family was great. Vegas is going through its own set of challenges, squarely in the midst of that. But I wrapped up my time there in October, November last year, and have since launched my own consulting practice called Momentum Advisory Partners, and I joined a group called GMA, Global Market Advisors, really focused on helping folks develop integrated resorts and operate them all over the world. And so, sorry for that long-winded story, but hopefully people can see the nuance, kind of throughout.
Yeah, no, really, really appreciate it, and definitely a lot to unpack there, all the way from, playing football at Howard, to going to banking at Goldman Sachs. And one thing I just kind of want to touch on right off the bat is like, you were in New York, London. How'd you make that transition to be able to go to London as an analyst? Like, I feel like that's not as common anymore. What did you really learn there that helped you figure out, hey, this is what I want to do in the future? Or when you were CEO of,
No, so it's interesting, and I think as you go throughout your career, you'll understand the role that what industry you're in, what investment cycle, what the broader economy is doing, sometimes has a lot to do with the opportunities that are presented before you, and then what how things operate. And so I'll give you a prime example to answer your question of going all the way back to Goldman. I first started on Wall Street. I was 19, when I was working at JP Morgan. And so what defined the market in that summer, which was the summer of 2000, was really, we were coming off of like Y2K, and for certain people who won't even remember, but we all thought the world was going to end because there was a extra zero or something. I can't remember. But there was the market was soft because of a little, I think the tech bubble or something. Oh no, the market was hot. The market was hot because I ended up staying at YMCA because there were so many interns, so many people who were in New York City that there just wasn't really enough housing to even sublet a room. So I ended up staying in, it looked like, no offense to the YMCA in Hoboken, but it looked like a psych ward inside the facility. But again, that opportunity, my dad knew that, hey, people had places for you to stay at the YMCA, so I went and looked. I had just come back from Oaxaca, Mexico. I spent like the summer studying abroad, and the place, and that was one of the few places that did. And so I say that, like, look, my housing experience was a function of the market. So then come 2003, summer 2003, the market is still good. And so at that time, you typically, as you're correct, you don't move, particularly in your second year of an analyst program, because you're really just starting to get your groove. But in this case, the company, Goldman, needed more investment bankers in the London office at the associate level. So they wanted people who were right out of business school who could go in and be on a team. They didn't have any associates from New York who wanted to leave the mothership to go to London. So my business unit manager, he's actually running banking now, his name is Matt Gibson, he leaned over to me. He used to call me Little G-Day. And G-Day's Island was a big time dog at Goldman at the time. We looked alike, and it was so funny. But yeah, he used to call me Little G-Day. Hey, do you want to? He just said, hey, do you want to go to London? I said yes. So there was no process. I just sat next to the guy who needed to fill a hole. He asked me. I said yes. And 2 weeks later, I was living in London.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, paid out my roommate for the rest of the money I owed him for the rent for the rest of the year. Fortunately, when I was at Howard, I had gone and taken a trip to London and really enjoyed it for the couple of days I was there. So I had been exposed, which sometimes that's all it takes, and went over and absolutely loved it. I mean, the Europeans, they get work-life balance so much better than we do here in the States. And it was great. Traveled to Paris and Rome and Spain, Norway, Amsterdam. It was just really great.
I also studied abroad there, and like it's one of the best places. I was right by, if you've ever been to Elephant and Castle, I was right by, what's the club? Ministry of Sound.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so I lived right over there. So I love London, but that's incredible. Just you sat next to the guy, you got to go there and, experience Europe, which I feel like not a lot of people get to. So you ended up, finishing out the next year and a half, 2 years there. And then I presume, you probably had a lot of, high profile, come to this PE firm that's raising a bunch of money. What kind of made you want?
It was interesting. Like I joke and say I was a great intern, a great first year. I was an okay intern, a great first year analyst. But every subsequent year in banking, I spent 5 years altogether. It was a close realization that, I joke and say is like, look, I was a great first year analyst and I would be a great partner, but everything in between, like, was a struggle. Like being an associate, then a VP, then an MD, like, I was like, man, because what I liken it to, and I liken everything in high school, is like in high school on a graduation stage, there are typically two students who are up on stage. It's typically a person who has excelled academically, and then the other person is good at winning friends and influencing people. One's called the valedictorian, the other's called the student body president, right? So there's two pathways to kind of being a leader. One is academic, one is, let's call it social. And I was social. And so I had a great attitude, worked hard, listened, did all the other different things. But in order to be a really good, let's say, third year analyst, a really good let's call it VP or MD, or move up that track, you've got to be a really good student, and what I'd call is like have a bit of a valedictorian in you. But then on that middle part, then eventually you begin to get judged based upon your people skills, like your ability to go win business. And so I found myself like gravitating to a lot of people who were quarterbacking or driving the business or all these other different kind of components. But the technical, and that, look, you can't survive if you don't have some element of technical ability. But what I quickly realized, and what, to get to your point, yes, there were lots of opportunities, which I joined a boutique investment bank in Las Vegas and went on. But ultimately, I found that, hey, in order to really continue to exceed, I probably needed more AP classes, more, like a couple thousand more points on my SAT or however it scored, right? And so ultimately, I chose a career that is probably the most like being a student body president in high school, is being a president of a big property or a casino or whatever else. Because you're bringing people together on a daily basis to have a party and have a good time. And so I think so much, I share that for, particularly for young people who are coming up, is to be able to say, hey, what skill set do I need to have in order to be successful in either the career that I'm looking to pursue? Because some people are good at what I call pop quizzes, and some people are good at research reports. To be a trader, and I didn't like equity capital markets as much, is because I had to wake up super early, be there with the markets when they were open, and you need to know where, Jackson Hewitt was going to trade at when they went IPO, because you have a good sense of the market, and so you got to be up on it every day. What I really enjoyed is putting together the equity story to riding alongside the CEO on his roadshow to go take the company public. I could tell that story inside and out, partly because we sat with him on a roadshow for all this different time. And so that was more emblematic of a research report to say, what range should this company go public? Why should it go public? What is it going to do with this money? And why should you be an investor in it? That's a research report. The trader, they're saying, where should this IPO open today? And my stomach wasn't built for that, of the trading and the ups and downs. And so I spent 5 years in banking, and it really gave me a great foundation that has helped me kind of throughout my career. But at 25, I still didn't really know. Even after 3 years of being at Goldman, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. In many ways, I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, I think we all are, and that's incredible. Did you always kind of plan on going back to Vegas? Obviously, you were in London, New York, like two amazing cities, probably my favorite cities in the world. Was it always like, hey, let's get back to Vegas and figure it out?
No, it was interesting. Again, for a long time, I joke and say, hey, you fake it till you make it. But look, again, I was in Vegas. I was in LA. I ended up getting a call from a boutique bank in Las Vegas that was looking for kind of associates. So called this guy by the name of John Gilchrist, I'm friends with till to this day. And he gave me a call, came in for an interview. I joined him and another guy named Vinny Single and a bunch of my friends that I'm still friends with till this day. I joined a small firm, and that's what brought us back here, and it was nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, no, awesome. And obviously then from there, you jump into Caesars. And I know obviously you started kind of in an FP&A role, doing the forecasting and everything, but what was kind of the point where it's just like, hey, like, I still don't know what I want to do, maybe I'm approaching 30, early 30s. Like,
yeah,
when we're like, I want to get my hands dirty.
So going from investment banking, like the hours, like well documented, super crazy. So it was great being able to go in-house and see a more normal pace, let's say, of just being able to crank through. And what I realized is, look, I had a significant technical, let's call it prowess, as it related to almost the generic business. At the time, Apollo and TPG had just taken Harrah's Entertainment public. And so they were starting to infuse, let's call these post-MBA or banker consultant types into the business. And so it really helped me to develop relationships with the people who were running the hotels and resorts. I remember going in to your point of like trying to figure out what I want to be in my life. There's a guy by the name Steve Updike at the Paris Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I quickly realized that like Steve like literally built the hotel like from ground up and could tell you every nook and cranny, and I would just listen and learn so much. First about hockey because Steve was into hockey, but then I learned a lot about the hotel business, and so part of this is you're just thinking about us. Okay, hey, well, how do I navigate? And so I said to myself, in order then to become a VP of this hotel, and Steve's story goes like all the way back. I'm not for sure, but I think all the way back to like working with Steve Wynn or working with some luminary like that. You're like, I wouldn't hire me to be a VP here because this guy like knows more in his thumb than I do, in this computer that I'm lugging around, right? And so what I quickly then saw was, it says, hey, a lot of the talent that's breaking in at a more general management, let's say, path or trajectory is doing so outside of Las Vegas. And so I said, I better prepare to, at some point, raise my hand to move. And so people often ask, they say, well, how'd you get to be the CEO, or whether it's in Iowa or even back in Vegas? The answer was we moved like 5 or 6 times. And so because you're never going to find the perfect job in the perfect place at the perfect pay at the perfect time, there's always going to be some form of sacrifice. But in many ways, these ladders inside of corporate aren't always linear, but there's a pattern. And so if you can see either the pattern or you can understand the market and understand where talent is needed, you can excel at a much faster rate than other people who may say, I'm with the company, I'm killing it, but I'm never moving. And that can be, there's a choice. There's no right or wrong. But there's an impact and there's a choice. But hopefully that answered one of your questions in there.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just like, hey, like you said, you're going to have to go outside of, Vegas because there's such great talent and, go to Baltimore. And how was that? Obviously, just like, being there when they broke dirt to, actually, when they had over 2,200 employees. That must just be such a cool thing to see with your own eyes. Like, I can't even imagine what that's like.
That was really, look, I had some great promotions internally in Vegas, but that opportunity to, again, be employee number 2 on a project where you're going from the development team has went and chased the deal and now it's real, to going from, okay, hey, now I'm going back to Wall Street with a deck as on the other side of the table saying, I need money to go help and build it for this project. And so that was cool going through that process because it was full circle. I ended up working with one of the then VPs who was an analyst with me at the time, Courtney Holben. And so that was cool. And then saying, okay, all right, well, we have to pay the state of Maryland $25 million, and then we need to go and cut a lease deal with the city. We needed to go run an election campaign to try to get table games passed, develop a brand, pick out all the uniforms, work in what's called an OAC meeting, owner, architects, and construction meeting. So just to see the process of taking something from a piece of dirt to opening the doors, and just seeing that full-on process and then running it. And then I had the first 24-hour liquor license in the city of Baltimore. It was in my name personally. And because they hold an individual accountable. And so I was 32, and so it was you start to grow up real quick. And it was a great experience. I loved it. I walked to work, walked to Camden Yards, walked to the Raven Stadium, and it was really a formative experience, particularly managing people who were older than I was, and then just being in a new city. It was one of if not my favorite, right up there.
Yeah, no, that's amazing and must be super interesting, like you said, managing people that are a little older than you. Because like you said, you're 32 at the time, VP, assistant GM. Did you ever get any people where it's like, hey, like, screw off, Alex, you're just a kid. I've been doing this for a long time.
I think it was, fortunately, because I was there at the beginning, people pay deference when you offer them a job. So, I mean, And, look, you are the way that you act, right? And working on Wall Street really helped me just develop that self-confidence. I mean, I had self-confidence before, but you then just quickly realize that, look, some of these analysts or even junior associates end up on the boards of these companies, and you got like late 20s people, giving direction to people in their 50s and 60s. So you just quickly say, hey, look, all right, we got to get over it, whatever the issues are. But so much is just you don't have as much life experience to build upon. I mean, someone once told me that says, hey, you're not an adult till you're 35, and I didn't get it till I was about 40. And so it's just that developing the scar tissue, developing perspectives. I remember I was working graveyard for the first 6 months. I'd go to work at 11 p.m. and then come back at 7 a.m. because we just needed an adult in the room. Because again, there was just because you can drink liquor 24 hours a day doesn't mean that you should. And so many nights I would just shut down all the bars because we needed to get everybody either home safely, or we just need to give people a bedtime. And those were just some of the things that you just learned at an early age.
Yeah, no, that's just an incredible experience, being 32 and operating at a scale that large. And obviously, right after that, you were at MGM Springfield. Even a bigger development must have just, you have some scar tissue from the Baltimore experience.
Yeah, it was those lessons learned when I went for my interview, as you could imagine, of opening up a new casino in a major. In a major downtown city, it allowed me to ace my interview, and that's ultimately how I got a job. Because people typically don't go from an assistant general manager at Caesars to a GM at MGM. But I'd be remiss that there were policies that really helped to just give me an opportunity to interview. And I was in the interview process. I don't think at first they were intending to hire, but look, there's a small number of people who at the time had built a major casino in a downtown area, kind of from the ground up. And it just so happened that's what they were doing again. And I was very fortunate to kind of come on board. But it was Massachusetts I call it Leave It to Beaverland. And it was just, people would come by, like bring you pie, and like just like the kids roamed around. It was just a great time.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Any the key big takeaways from your time there? Just of like, wow, like
it was literally the impact that MGM had and still has on the community, of helping to have that downtown community thrive. It was a great example, as Baltimore was. Baltimore, look, already had the Orioles, already had the Ravens, already had so many of the great cultural things that they have in the city going on. Springfield had great, rich history, but casinos have the power to convene and bring people together and drive economic output. And my big takeaway there is if you do it right, casino development can help to be a catalyst to bring energy around, whether it's a downtown or just a neighborhood. And I think we're a critical piece of infrastructure, because we are one of the few places in American life, particularly in today's AI society, that everyone along the economic spectrum can come into the same place and expect this, at a minimum, same, let's say, type of interaction, meaning I don't care if you have $1 or $1 million, we're going to come in, we're going to smile, say hello, and making sure that you have a good time. So many other aspects of our life you can just avoid. You don't have to go to the grocery store. You don't have to go to the gas station. You don't have to go to a bank. You don't have to go to school. So brick and mortar land-based casinos are one of the few places where people still physically go up and rub shoulders with strangers. And it's a cool social experiment to see.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love the subway for that reason in New York as well. It's similar, like, hey, there might be a guy who's a managing partner at a private equity firm, and then there might be a homeless person, and, anywhere in between there. So it's just always cool to, like, see how these people interact with each other.
Exactly right.
just cool experience. So obviously then you're at Circus Circus as you've talked. How was like, now you're in the C-suite, so like chief operating officer and president, like, still probably early 30s, mid 30s if I had to guess.
Yeah, no, I was, let's see, I think I was maybe 38, 39. It was definitely one of the younger presidents inside MGM. But again, look, I was very fortunate in that at the time, MGM was going through a transition much like what happened at Caesars. So when I was at Caesars Entertainment, I was in the corporate office, and a big part of my job, I was in the program management office, or PMO. I ran a big project called Project Renewal. So this is private equity comes in and says, hey, look, because it's just the demands of the business, we need to take operating costs out. So I was very much the hatchet man, if you will, at Caesars. And we hired a bunch of people from Bain, and then I was at MGM. Similar thing was, kind of happening. They're right-sizing the management structure. So my role was going to be eliminated, meaning my spot as general manager and number 2 in property was going to be eliminated. And then MGM quickly had a competitive process to figure out who was going to run Mirage and Circus Circus. So there's a bunch of us applied. I was fortunate enough to win. And yeah, moved literally within 10 days of getting the offer into a suite in Circus Circus. And it was amazing experience. I think operating on the Las Vegas Strip, we had 3,700 hotel rooms, 7th largest hotel in North America, operated on 100 acres, about 2,000 employees. But it was great coming in, did not compile the team. There was a big shakeup within MGM, and people were kind of placed there, but developed great relationships. So, within there, again, no one, now I can talk openly about it, but yeah, ultimately, 3 weeks prior, I thought my gaming career was going to be coming to an end as a general manager. Was going to take a severance and move on. But fortunately, won out in the interview process. And in literally less than 6 years after joining as a director of planning and analysis in Las Vegas, I'm now president of a property on the Las Vegas Strip. Look, it's a circuitous route, but you never can let what's on your W-2 go to your head, because as soon as it comes, it can goes. And so I learned that lesson there. And a true friend told me, says, don't fall in love with the firm. But in this case, look, I was 38. I thought I was going to be a president at MGM for the rest of my career. And just move up from like Circus to Excalibur, because that was the path. So the path that once I got inside, going all the way back to Caesars, was, hey, go out to go up. So go to Baltimore. I was assistant general manager. They brought in a GM on top of me, my good friend Aaron Chamberlain, chief operating officer at Topgolf now. She came in, and then this opportunity came up with MGM, joined. But the further you get up that pyramid, the fewer and fewer roles there are, number one. And two, it's a little bit easier to kind of chop you off from the top. And so had a great time at Circus, but a big lesson learned was like, hey, make sure you got a good exit strategy. And then second is, don't ever get too comfortable. And today's world is just a testament to that. And it was a great lesson to learn, at least in that capacity early on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, was so cool. Like you said, starting out and, doing FP&A, being a president of a COO of a resort on the Strip. That must have been so cool just for your family as well. Being like, Alex is the...
Oh, no, the kids, ran around Circus Circus like they owned the place. It was probably, with kids at that age, they were like 10, 11, 12, was just a great place. Because that's one of the big sacrifices in the journey. Mm-hmm. It's just the time you spend away and a number of other different components. But yeah, it was great for the family, and great for a lot of family and friends here in Las Vegas as well.
Yeah, and I know this might just be a dumb question, but so when you are like president and COO of Circus Circus, are you in a corporate office? Are you on like the floor of the actual property? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so it's funny you asked about office and at Circus Circus. Like, my most palatial estate as an office was there at Circus Circus. And so it was built in an era where, the owner of the hotel, built the initial office. So, I mean, it was just, there was a whole a whole suite, big wood table. It was, if, let's see, it felt like 1983, and there's a lot of leopard, a lot of different places. But there was one of the desks that our CFO Carmel sat in. It had this area where you could literally put a shotgun underneath the desk, means of protection. But it was on site at Circus Circus. I could walk down and be at the trapeze area, into the arcade, and it was just it was a fun time. It was a great place, great people, and one of my favorite stops along the way.
Yeah, no, that's just awesome, especially, getting to have your family there. That must have just been like such a sacrifice as well with, moving from Springfield to Baltimore to Vegas, just kind of hopping around, Dubuque, Iowa as well, like especially with young kids. Like, how was making that transition, especially with your partner as well, like having that support, definitely could probably cause a lot of relationships to crumble. But that must have just been, testament to your guys' strength and everything.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, but very, very fortunate. Very fortunate. Everyone's happy and healthy, and
Yeah, definitely. And would love to just like, touch a little more on DRA, just like when you were there, like, moving to Dubuque, it's
yeah. I was the Las Vegas executive in Dubuque. And so I was afforded a lot of grace, a lot of mercy, had the wind at my back. But it's also really important as we talk about market timing, right? So we were coming out of COVID, and so it was the golden age. Not only, yeah, it was the golden age of regional gaming, in the sense that what we found all across the industry was that we had a lot of revenue. So we were spending a lot of marketing expense to get people to come in that we just didn't need to do, and that we just didn't need to do. And it afforded us to drive a lot more profit than we did before, kind of before COVID. Because before it was like, hey, everyone's beating on each other, and we thought we had to give away things every day to convince people to come in. And so we just ratcheted up our marketing expense. And with COVID, once things opened back up, we said, hey, why don't we try just not giving stuff away, and let's see if people still come. And they did. So we at Q and DRA, as well as all around the industry, saved a lot of money on marketing expense. And then there was a lot of pent up demand, from people having to stay at home, a number of other things. So again, I came in 21, so we were doing record, let's say, net income. My twist was to help redirect some or keep some of that in order to make sure that we could help reinvest in the business. But so much of people's careers and career trajectory sometimes is just a function of the overall market. Meaning, right now, Las Vegas, for instance, is having, for the first time in a long time, a decline in visitation versus for the first 40 years of things were moving. Every year, just more people came, and the question was like, how much more, and how much more are they going to spend? So we were in a period of, we had more demand than we had supply. Now, at least in Vegas, we have more supply than we have demand. And so I was blessed and fortunate to go to Dubuque, not when it was in the 1980s, when, it was like, hey, we need to throw a Hail Mary to figure out something. I was able to go when we were coming out of COVID and things were doing really well. And so having the wind at your backs affords you to do a number of things. So you got to be prepared. You got to have a plan. We went and raised the money, did all the other different things. But it just helped that, hey, there wasn't a global pandemic. There wasn't a global financial crisis. There wasn't an ongoing geopolitical stuff kind of going on. So I was able to be there at a good time, took advantage. But the community was just nothing short of amazing. I really found my stride as a person, as a leader, really understanding how to, not only green lighting projects, but how to manage a board of 21 people. And so, probably if I think about my legacy, it's just like, Dubuque and my time there at the Q Casino and DRA and running a nonprofit. There's only two of them in the country, Dubuque and Des Moines, Iowa. And so, really developed this really kind of deep knowledge about how do you impact communities within the confines of a nonprofit casino. And that's probably one of the more unique things that I've now really grown a passion about. And I've spoken at conferences in London and in Bahamas and other places to kind of help espouse. And I'm looking to replicate some of that in my hometown here in Vegas. But there's a lot of opportunity, I believe, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa and the Caribbean, to leverage the principles of nonprofit gaming to help unlock economic value in communities around the world. And so excited to continue those efforts as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Really appreciate you sharing that. Couple more questions I got, just like, on my end, like, what do you think of the number one thing, like an average person, kind of like myself, wouldn't and doesn't understand about casinos and kind of the gaming industry as a whole, as an insider?
It's interesting. So many people think that because I ran a casino, like I knew every casino game. And I can be open about it because, again, there's just no way to be an expert in everything. But I know the math that every game should hold, over long periods of time. I know, when you look to be able to say, okay, hey, handles per hour, a number of other different things, let's call it on the of gaming metrics, to be able to look at it from a planning and analysis perspective. But every game to like sit down at a table and play it, because let's say you're restricted in your own place from doing it. Now you can go to dealer school, which I did, and do all those other different those different things to try it. But there's certain games where people will come in and say, okay, yeah, let's play this obscure carnival game, and I'll be like, well, you got to teach me, because the specific nuances are always funny. And then it was just always, I could be on the floor. I knew what was, know what's going on. You got a team. You spend a lot of time. I mean, just over the years, you soak it up all in. But all the basic ones I got, but the nuanced ones, it's like, no, man, you gotta help me out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That makes total sense as well. And cool that you're actually a dealer, another way just to, hey, like, sympathize with your employees.
Yeah, I remember going to dealer school in Hammond, Indiana, and learning how to deal craps. And I quickly realized why it's a 12-week course, or it's a 10-week course, something like whatever it is, and not a 1-week course, because I was absolutely lost. But the dexterity that you have to have of being able to manage both of them is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, one last question on my end is, would love to hear, and I know you talked a lot about this of, the market timing and, this is where you're at, but and like kind of how your career went. But I would love to hear just how much of your career and your success do you contribute to, working your butt off, pulling the graveyard shift for 6 months straight, versus being lucky, being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, no, I think, let's call it, I think it's a classic kind of 80-20. Well, no, actually, here's how I break it down, and it's not just a binary. So there's success. So half the battle in life is showing up. So 50, that's like, that's an axiom, or people will say it, meaning just half the battle is physically being in the room to be able to move forward. So that's 50%. 30% is putting yourself in a position to be successful. And then 10% is hard work, and then 10% is luck. And so 80% of that is just like being in the right place at the right time. Or like putting yourself in the right place at the right time. So what that means is showing up for class and then sitting in the front of the class. That's like 80% of it. Then, all right, did you do your homework? And then it's to say, all right, hey, you got lucky, you were healthy, good Lord, like helped you to be successful. But those are the big elements. That's how I break it down.
Yeah, no, can't say it any better myself. Well, Alex, you have a really incredible journey, and would love to hear just like kind of like what's next. Obviously, you're doing your consulting, but like what are kind of any other big plans? And that's kind of it for me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. No, but I'm building out a great consultant practice as fractional chief development officer. Have a great roster of clients and looking to help people to achieve their goals. And I think more than anything else, the name of my firm is Momentum Advisory Partners, and that's what I provide. And so excited to see the next step in the journey.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see all the momentum with Momentum Advisors. And, I really thank you so much for coming on, Alex. Have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of The Making of, hosted by Jack Pitts. Huge thanks again to Alex Dixon for coming on and sharing his story. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation is just how important it is to keep showing up, staying adaptable, and put yourself in positions where opportunity can find you. From Goldman Sachs to MGM to Resorts World Las Vegas, Alex's career is a great example of what can happen when preparation meets timing and hard work. And if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe, leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening, and share it with someone who'd also enjoy it as well. And as always, I'm your host, Jack Pitts, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks so much. Bye.